Well, David, since you and I talked last, there have been some talks about some cabinet members and also in Washington and also Springfield that have either talked about, offered, or have actually stepped down. First one that I thought we should talk about is Secretary of Defense Robert Gates. Now, obviously, this is a guy that stuck around for both the Republican and Democratic administration, and he's talking about leaving around 2011. So I'm curious, does this have an effect on the possible withdrawal date from Afghanistan?
I don't think so. I think Secretary Gates has done yeoman's duty for this country, and those jobs are very stressful and high pressure. So it doesn't surprise me that at some point he will conclude that he's done all he can and he wants to move on. The policy is going to be in place. It's going to be tweaked some, but I guess I don't see this as changing the overarching notion that this country wants to get out of Afghanistan as soon as it possibly can. And I think Obama is going to have a political imperative to get that done prior to the 2012 elections.
People have compared him to Robert McNamara. Is that fair?
Too early to say that. You know, McNamara is so tarred with Vietnam, and he made mistakes in Vietnam. I think it's a little harsh to lay that on Gates, but let's have a little history. Let's have a little time here. Let's let this war wrap up and then look back and see how he conducted it before we're too critical.
Well, and I think some of the reports were even talking about that comparison in a good light. Is that a good comparison?
Well, McNamara, it's true. Yeah, McNamara, it's true, tried to reform the military, and Gates is too. The trouble with doing that is that the military is a huge bureaucracy, and it's a very difficult lift. And I think we'll see if the ideas that Gates has tried and has set in motion will survive under a successor.
Now, this is going to be an interesting time for the Obama administration. It'll be January of 2011. The deadline to withdraw will be coming up, and obviously the White House will start to be looking towards 2012. So I'm curious, where do you see the White House starting to look to find Gates' replacement?
Well, I think with a lot of positions in the White House, after the November election this year, there will be a period of comings and goings. There is in every administration. You'll get through the election. It'll probably be a tough election for Democrats. There'll be a need to recalibrate the party, the message, the administration, and there'll be some people who are just flat out burned out, Barton. They've come out of the campaign, they went right into the White House, and working 24/7, and it takes a toll. And so I look for a lot of changes at staff levels, maybe some at the cabinet level, and they'll want to get that done prior to the time that they have to get into full-bore election mode in 2012.
There's been some talks that Secretary Tom Vilsak might be one of those cabinet members. I'm curious, with your history with Vilsak over in Des Moines, do you see him staying on through the rest of the Obama administration?
I think he would stay on if the president wants him. I think Tom Vilsak enjoys the job of being Secretary of Agriculture. He made a mistake in his handling of this racial issue here. He's trying to recover from that. So my answer to your question is I think he'll want to stay on. I don't think there's any compelling reason right now anyway that they see to letting him go.
That said, was it a surprise to you when Politico reported, I believe it was yesterday, that he had offered to resign amidst the charade?
No, it doesn't. I mean, anytime a cabinet officer does something that embarrasses the administration or the president, as this has done, you know, it's appropriate for that member to say, you know, I serve at your pleasure and I'm willing to leave if you want me to.
Closer to home, Governor Quinn's Chief of Staff, Jerry Stermer, stepped down on Sunday. Now, this has brought up a lot of questions. Number one, about how long it took the Executive Inspector General to file the report, and Stermer and Wright left the administration on the same day. I'm curious, how should one process what happened in the Quinn administration last week?
Stay tuned. You're right. There are a lot of questions that were raised. There are not a lot of answers yet, and I think what might have been a relatively minor deal has been blown up by the way it's been handled here. So one of the issues going forward is whether the governor can in fact get on top of this, get it behind him, and move on. Look, the average citizen in Illinois doesn't care about comings and goings and chiefs of staff and things like that. What are we talking about here? Emails on a government BlackBerry. You know, a lot of people would say that's not necessarily a fireable offense. There's got to be something else. So that's why I say there are other, you know, there's going to have to be, there's probably more to be said here. We have to wait to see that. We have to wait to see how the administration handles this. But I think the challenge for the governor is to get the campaign back on message.
Now, you said that this is usually not a fireable offense. What was it that doomed Jerry Stermer this time around? Was it solely because of the election?
I think Stermer wanted to take himself out of the picture and not be a distraction. The timing of this is what raises questions and makes people think that there's something more that's there. It could all be very innocent, but have him and the Inspector General go on the same day, that's what's raising all these questions about, is there something more? I think the governor's going to have to get this behind him.
So if you were reporting this story, where would you start where would you start asking questions to try and find out more about this?
I think you have to look to the governor himself to lay out the timelines and to explain this, to have a stand-up press conference, lay this all out. I mean, this happens in politics, and the way you handle it is you let the fire burn itself out. But you get it over with as soon as possible and hopefully change the subject and move on.
But now that the governor has had that press conference and talked when he appointed his new chief of staff, do you foresee him talking about it very much anymore?
No. I think unless there's something new to add to the fire, some new gas to put on the fire, I don't think it's the kind of thing that people in the main streets of Illinois are riveted to, are talking about, and so hopefully Quinn can change the subject.
Do you foresee this development in the Quinn administration to trump the Blagojevich card that the Republicans should play?
Everybody's playing cards all over the place, Barton, and
right.
You know, I think you know it's a cat and mouse game. The challenge for Republicans here is to keep this story alive. The challenge for Quinn is to get the story changed and move on to something else. We'll see how it plays out.
So, if you were going to advise the Republicans right now, would you want to tell them? Would you rather run a Stermer card, or would you rather keep on Blagojevich?
I think you're doing all of the above as an example of that it's time for a change. And for the Democrats' part, the counter is that Brady would be an unsafe choice. He would, you know, he's not hasn't experience in the job. That's all part of the back and forth. And
really quick before we go, today Rod Blagojevich's trial, the date was set. It's going to be coming up in January. Be after the election, so at least they won't be gearing up for it. They'll be gearing up for the trial as the election as it is upon us. How does this affect Quinn politically, or does it play an effect?
I think it's probably good news for Quinn, because now we move this story on. We don't have a period of time in the next few months where there's a discussion of sentencing and appeals and all that. It's just been put on hold. We've talked before. I think that the Blagojevich episode did its damage to the Democrats early on, and now the Democrats are lucky in that sense. It's now been pushed into January, and it won't have much to do with the election. It won't have anything to do with the election.
And in your perspective, was the government right to drop charges on Robert?
I don't know. That's outside of my field of expertise. I think the prosecutors always have discretion about where they bring charges, and if they couldn't get a conviction the first time around, it's easy to see them walking away from any number of charges.
All right. David, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bart.